and challenge it with time. Say you have the patience, believe that we'll be fine. Keep the memories coming and wipe away the tears. Let me be the lover who comforts through the years.
We're live from the #1 community cable access station in our nation. Yes, this is CCTV, not Communist China TV, but we're broadcasting from the great Republic of Cambridge. Yes, at the heart of Cambridge, here we are in Central Square. And as I said before, we are so much involved in being the #1 community cable access station in the United States. And it's on the World Wide Web right now. All over the world, this TV show is being broadcast. My guest today is Regina Valluzzi. Dr. Regina, she is very much involved with being an artist. She loves working in the arts. There we have a landscape with black cats, and we're going to come back to that and talk about what that's all about. It's a very, very special painting, and she's going to explain to all of us what it is. But in the meantime, let's talk to Regina Valluzzi. Welcome, Regina.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Regina.
Happy to be here.
Regina, how long have you worked in the fine works of art? And do you work in watercolors only? Do you work with oil?
Well, I've been painting on and off for over 25 years now. And when I first started, I was doing a lot of drawing in watercolors. But I've migrated over the years to doing more and more oils. So
why
right
is
now,
that?
mostly
Why do you do that? Why do you migrate towards the oils?
With the watercolors and the drawings, a lot of it was space considerations. I started drawing and painting when I was still in college, living in a dormitory. The oils give you a lot more freedom to really explore how paint works as a material. And my science background is in material science. I'm a polymer scientist. Oil is a great polymer, and it's a lot of fun to play with it as a material and as a polymer while at the same time using it to create a painting or a work of art.
Now, if I understand, that's very interesting. From what I gathered from what you said, do I understand that it's good for like anyone to go from water to oil so that we can see a slower process of what actually is going on, a more visual, get into the painting a little bit more? Is that what you meant by some of what you meant?
Well, in the case of an oil, because it takes so long to dry, you can work it a lot more. There are very different techniques involved in getting a watercolor to do what you want, to work the way you want, versus an oil painting. And I think that a lot of it is a matter of personal preference. What sort of look do you like? How quickly do you like to work? Do you like the immediacy of watercolor, where everything is just there as soon as it's down on the paper? Or
And
do you
is
like
this
to really
water-
work
is-
it? This
is-
is an oil painting.
This is an oil painting.
Mm-hmm.
It almost looks sort of like a watercolor in one way. The colors, the quality of the colors, the use of those colors. From looking at it, am I wrong to say that?
Well, I did start out doing a lot of watercolors, so a lot of the ideas of how to use color and blend were probably borrowed from there and probably persist in some of my oil painting. And I do like to use the oil in unusual ways sometimes. This is a fairly straightforward, traditional, I'd say almost impressionist little oil painting using very bright colors of the black cats. And maybe it's the color intensity that reminds you of the watercolor medium.
Yes, I love this. This is a beautiful work of art. Now, I see cats there. Now, this sort of reminds me of that location there reminds me of Ipswich, Cranes Beach, for some reason.
Okay.
I mean, because it looks sort of like this, like they're in the sand dunes, but they're in a field.
They're in a world that belongs to cats. They're in their black cat world.
Very nice. Very nicely done. And how long does a work of art, this particular work of art, do you recall how long it took you to do it?
It's a little hard for me to recall exactly how long they take because with the oil painting taking so long to dry, I usually work them in stages, and I'll have 4 or 5 of them going on at the same time in various stages and be switching back and forth. So I would guess maybe 6 or 7 hours, but I'm not really sure.
Now, is this one of the two little paintings for charity?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so now let's take a look at this here. These are two little paintings for charity. The landscape with the black cats, and then there'll be a seascape with white cats. The proceeds from the sale of these paintings will go to...
There's a local animal rescue based in Medford, but they operate in Somerville and Cambridge and in Arlington as well. They're called Kitty Connection. They're on the web as kittyconnection.org. I've volunteered with them in the past. I've done fundraising for them in the past, and we got 2 of our 3 cats from them. I really like the work that they do, and I think that it's unique and important because they'll take cats that people are surrendering from their homes and dogs too, and they'll help these animals find new homes by letting people foster them. So instead of putting a strain on the system and having some poor family that not only has to give up their pet, they have to give it up to a shelter and worry about what's happening to it, the family gets to see the pet going into a temporary home and know that it's going to find a good home and that it'll be well taken care of until it does. So I think it's a great thing, and you should see how relieved some of these families are, especially when they have kids, to see that their cat, in my case, their cat is going into a foster home where, it's in somebody's house and not in a cage. So I think that helping animals in this case really does help people.
And that's kittyconnection.org. Now, this next picture here, is this the detail from the landscape?
These are zooms of various parts of the landscape with black cats because I went in with an itty-bitty little brush and painted in all of these teeny tiny little black cats.
You did a great job.
Thanks.
A really great job. And once again, you will be able to visit more of this information as we're going along. And talking about information, we do have something coming up, which is an Arlington Open Studio on October the 16th and 17th. That's where we're reporting right now, folks. That's 2010. And we'd like you to get a peek of that there. The Arlington Open Studios, October 16th and 17th. That's at the Gibbs Center at 41 Foster Street in Arlington. The telephone number is 781-648-6220. And you can go to info at ACARTS.
ACARTS.
Yes. And so as we continue today's show, we're very interested in exploring a slideshow presentation. So for the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to simply focus on this detailed presentation that Regina has brought to us. It's her works of art, and she loves sharing her culture, her development, so that more people will feel inspired about life, to get connected to the variations of life, and to move on and just to enjoy the fullness of the experience on Earth, And so we're going to go back here now to the computer. Michael, can you bring us into the computer, please? Okay. So now we see that in detail. We're going to go to another work, Seascape with White Cats, which is also part of the charitable donation of Regina Valluzzi. Tell us about this here.
So, first, I'd like to just say that with the 2 paintings, I'm trying to sell the originals to raise money for charity, but I also have prints that are available, and all of my profits from the prints will also go towards this charity through January. Okay.
Yes,
this camera.
Yes, very good.
Okay.
So
this is a seascape with white cats that we're looking at now, and basically I like to joke that when I was doing the black cat painting, the white cat was in my face, like, paint me, paint me. She was actually getting behind the easel and sticking her paws over while I was trying to paint. So I had to do this, and, if the black cats are chilling out in the meadow, the white cats are, of course, they're chilling on the beach. They're getting fancy there. So the little cat whose ears you see in the very front is pretty much a good rendition of the inspiration kitty.
Very nicely done. Very nicely done. Seascape with White Cats by Regina Valluzzi. Now we're going to go to the next work of art.
And these are just some details, actually, from the seascape with white cats, because, again, I went in with a tiny brush and painted all these little cats, and it can be hard to see from the distant view. But you can see Becky, and you can see a little bit of her little green eyes, perhaps, depending on your television.
Now, what genre in the art realm would you call this?
I have no idea. I'd say it's vaguely impressionistic.
Yes, I would say that. I see it that way, too. It's beautiful. Outstanding. Now we're going to go into another section of the show. Can you read this to our guest at home?
Sure.
And we're going to show Regina at the same time as she's reading it.
Okay, so the floral landscapes that I do are again in a somewhat impressionistic genre. They'll look impressionistic on your screen. If you actually saw them in person, you'd see that I use a lot of texture and use the paint in some interesting and unusual ways. But the overall effect is definitely impressionistic. I like doing floral paintings. They're a very common subject for painters. But what the florals and the landscape paintings give me are these plant motifs. So you can take the plant and you can repeat it about the painting. And you start to develop a pattern. And the paintings coalesce out of that pattern of flowers, or in some case leaves or trees. That idea of a whole coalescing from the sum of a bunch of little parts is actually something that's a very common theme in the science that I do. But in the science, it's all very abstract. This is my way of putting it into paint, while at the same time giving everybody a really lovely landscape or lovely floral painting to look at.
And here we go, folks.
This is one of my most recent. It's called Daisy Days. It's an oil painting, and this was actually done by working on unprimed canvas with very loose washes of oil. And so as the loose wash goes into the unprimed canvas, it seeps in and it stays put. So it's a very loose, light coating, and it blends in some ways that are more like watercolor than like oil. And then on top of that, I used some very, very modern oil painting techniques where you're working with really thick paint to create a textured impasto, and that's how all the flowers were painted in. So you have this subtle watercolor wash in the background, and in the foreground you have these really detailed, chunky flower shapes, and the effect, I think, is very nice. It gives you a painting that has a lot of contrast, a lot of detail, a lot of depth, and a lot of color.
Next, please.
And these are just some details from that where you can maybe, depending again on your television, you can start to see some of the work that went into the impasto in the foreground, and also see some of that washy texture in the background on the right.
When I see this, it reminds me of Monet. Monet's works of art, bright colors, very nicely done. Now, these floral landscape paintings were painted on unprimed canvas. What does that mean, unprimed canvas?
Normally when you prepare a canvas for an oil painting, there are several stages you go through. You take a piece of cloth and you stretch it over a wooden frame, and then you use something called a size. I use polyvinyl alcohol size, but the more traditional thing would be to use rabbit skin glue, which I don't like the idea of. But you take this size, and basically what that does is it tightens up and it starts to seal the fibers. And then on top of that, you use something called a gesso, which is just a mixture of paint and sand or marble powder. And that gives you a very opaque white background to paint on. You can get very bright white canvas nowadays, and the oil paint doesn't really harm the canvas in any way, or you wouldn't be able to use it as gesso. So I've been trying to paint without using that gesso layer, or painting on the opposite side of that gesso layer, and that gives you a background that's much more absorbent, and it behaves very differently from the gessoed layer, which is very, very slick. So it makes the paint sit on the canvas in a very different way, especially when you're first starting the first few layers of paint. It gives you much more of a watercolor, muted, blended effect that can be very lovely, especially with some of these floral and more naturalistic paintings.
And the next work about Michael, can you bring it up, please?
So this is another floral painting. This is an older one than Daisy Days. It's called Red and Blue, and it's using that same technique again. you can sort of see some of that washy texture and that watercolor-like blending in the blue of the sky and some of the background blues in some of the flowers, some of the deeper areas. And then again on top, to bring out the brighter, lighter colors, the reds and the yellows, I had to switch from that wash technique to actually using thick layers of paint that just sort of lie on the very top of the canvas. It's almost like having an applique, almost like something you do with fabric where you're, ironing things onto the canvas. And that's the effect that you get. It's almost like this plastic roses are stuck to the front of the canvas. So it
does look that way. It really does. That's a great way to describe it.
So even though the overall style looks impressionistic, in real life there's this something there that normal impressionists wouldn't really do, and it makes them, I think, interesting and unique.
Right now, folks, you can see the trick photography of having Dr. Regina Valluzzi in her work of art there. And when we look at works of art, do we see the painter in the work of art? So let's continue now with our guest, Dr. Regina Valluzzi. We'll go to the next work of art. Michael, can you please bring it into view?
This is the last of those floral landscapes that I'm going to talk about today, and this is actually the first one that I'd ever done in that style and in that vein. And
flowers growing up a blue wall.
And this one actually uses a lot more of that wash effect with very loose layers of paint that just seep into the background canvas and are blended in. You can see how that looks very clearly in the corners of the painting, where you see that you have these muted colors that are just sort of flowing and blending into one another. And the blending effect is much more like watercolor than in a typical oil painting. And then again, on top, I had to use thicker paint with an impasto medium to get the yellow flowers and some of the roses and some of the brighter blue flowers to lay on the top of the canvas so they wouldn't get blended in with all of that washy color.
Now you say impasta medium. What does that mean?
Well, it's not spaghetti. There's a traditional oil painting technique called impasto, where you basically take the paint and without diluting it very much, you leave it thick and you work it onto the canvas so that all of the brush strokes still show, and you can get ridges and valleys within the paint itself because it's thick and it doesn't flow. Nowadays, with advances in paint, you actually have different media that allow you to do much more with impasto. You can make thicker layers, you can make it dry, you can make it hold textures much better. And I make use of a lot of those new media in these sorts of paintings.
Excellent work. It's the time, the effort, the intelligence, the feelings, the relationship with truth, or the relationship with abstract beauty or imagination. You bring out the whole gamut there, Regina. You did a great, excellent job.
Thank you.
So now we're going to turn the show to the next stage, which is, I believe, abstract.
Actually, I had a few landscapes in there first that are just more traditional.
Let's go to those landscapes. Michael, can you bring it into this here? But let's see now what we have here. Let's go to the computer. Okay, so we have some writing here. Regina, would you care to read some of it to our guests, and we'll put you in the film as well while you're reading it.
The next group of paintings are landscapes. I'm really more of an abstract painter than a landscape painter, so even when I'm doing things like landscapes and florals, there are strong abstract elements, and you can think of them as being abstract realist or abstract landscapes. Again, I've done some things with the paint where I like working with loose, flowing layers of paint and getting some watercolor-like effects, right? But in this case, I'm painting on the gessoed side of the canvas, so the surface is slick and the colors don't seep in. Instead, they drip and they move and they roll and they stain the canvas very differently.
As it is here.
As it is there. And if you look sort of to the lower right of the painting, you can see some of those effects are still very visible. But I created a lot of that texture in with the tree trunks and some of the branches by allowing the paint to drip in different directions. And then I painted over it to sort of give it form and to layer it and give it a little dimension and depth and to create the landscape. And it's a nice way of creating a painting because, again, you get a little more movement and a little more flow in the paint. And you let nature have a role in the painting because there's an element of randomness, but there's still an element of human intelligence that comes in and orders the randomness. And ordering randomness, that's what we scientists and engineers love. So.
Now, do you use your imagination? Are you using your imagination with this work of art, or do you have something that you're looking at that helps your imagination?
I almost never work from pictures. I've sometimes done sort of drawings outside, but most of these larger paintings are from imagination, purely.
And this is called the Edge of Eden. Why Edge of Eden?
Well, because it gives you the feeling of sort of an Edenic or an idyllic landscape and garden, but you'd be standing in the garden looking out at the very edge.
Yes.
That's
nice. Quite imagine. Very great imagination. I love it. Very good. So, where did you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island in a town called Northport. It's about halfway out on the North Shore.
Yes, and who was, would you say, the most influential person that helped you grow in your art skills?
There were a number of people. I mean, being somebody who really was deep in the sciences and studied science more than art, I sort of took my art skills, inspiration, and influences wherever I could find them. But I'd say the first person to have a major influence was my father, who had actually had a short career as a painter before he started getting serious about making money to raise his family, us. And he was a scholarship student at the New York Art Students League when he was very young. And he was very deep into the whole abstract expressionist movement and idea. And so he had a big influence. Some positive, because he taught me a lot, but also some a little less positive because I had set the bar so high in my mind from watching him paint that I didn't realize I was actually good at this until I got into college, because he'd tell us stories and his hands would just fly across the blank piece of paper and pictures would emerge, and for the longest time I thought that you just waved your hand with a pencil over the piece of paper and got a picture. And when I couldn't do that, I figured, well, I'm no good at drawing.
And what's your father's name?
My late father, and his name was Paul Valluzzi.
Paul Valluzzi. So we're dedicating today's show, folks, to Paul, and we're so glad that his daughter has come on the show today to share her experience, not to show off, but to share her wonderful works of art. Look at this here. We have Riverbank on the left. We have Escarpment. What does the word escarpment mean?
It's basically a set of cliffs, so cliffs and bluffs. And
I camped on a bluff. I camped on a bluff in Ireland at Salt Hill, and I was next to a giant boulder. And I started setting up my camp late in the day, so I didn't look over the bluff to see what was down below. And so then the next morning when I woke up, I decided to go exploring, and the place was absolutely a dream come true. It had millions and millions and millions of rocks about the size of two handfuls put together. And there was all sorts of designs with the waterscape, with the landscape combined. It was just an absolutely phenomenal experience. So from Ireland, let's go back here to live from Central Square, the #1 community cable access station in the nation, CCTV, Cambridge Community Television, serving the world. And so let's go back here. We're going to continue on this here. When you were influenced by your father, you became a more involved artist. Do you have any encouraging words to people at home right now who would like to be an artist and yet are not experiencing it presently?
Sure. One thing that I would say is it's almost like Edison's old saying about invention, where it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. I look at the paintings that I've done, and now, after doing this for years and working on it for years, I can be pretty confident that when I start a canvas that I can come up with a decent painting. But when I started, I was throwing out maybe 80 or 90% of my canvases and drawings because they really didn't work out. They weren't very good. So it's a progression. You start out, you may not like everything you do, but just do it, try to relax with it, and you'll get better at it, and then you'll get good at it.
Thank you so much for those encouraging words.
No
And so,
magic.
with about a couple of minutes left, we're going to go into looking at more of her works. We have here Lipstick Fish. And, is this work going to be shown at the Jam in Java?
It's at the Jam in Java right now. I'm maybe going to switch it out this weekend to take it to the Open Studios.
And, folks, you can go to 594 Massachusetts Avenue in Arlington, as you see it there on your screen. You can call 781-316-8400. It's going to be going on through January 2011. A number of paintings, especially larger pieces, that don't easily travel to shows. So get that pencil and write it down right now. Jam in Java, 594 Massachusetts Avenue. Yes.
You don't have to call them, just go in and get a coffee and you'll be able to see the work.
Yes. And Regina, what's your website, huh?
I have a couple of different websites that I'm using online, but I would recommend that you just email me at, you need to move that over, at rvalluzzi@alum.mit.edu and ask me for some links, and I'll just send you some clickable links, and you won't have to type in 50 million characters just to get an error message.
And that's rvalluzzi@alum.mit.edu. And so let's go back to the computer here. And we have Lipstick Fish, oil on canvas. Beautiful. There's a detail, close-up of it, of Lipstick Fish. Why Lipstick Fish?
I thought the colors reminded me of teenagers' lipstick, and I like that sort of bright tonality mixed in with the fish against the dark blue background.
Yes, and so Regina has websites she's built, and we're so glad that you came on, and we're looking forward to you emailing her, getting to know her better, and Google Regina Valluzzi. This is Danny DeGug from the Cambridge Sunshine Foundation. Have a great day, a great night. God bless you.
Hi, I'm Danny DeGug, and in times like this, we need creative voices, imaginative voices, and we need public access so that we can hear those voices. Support Cambridge Community Television.
Ready to take a walk? It's the 2010